I wasn't looking for evidence. Honestly, I wasn't looking for anything at all. I just needed a towel. The ones we usually kept in the bathroom were all in the laundry, so I opened the hallway cabinet without thinking, the same way you might flick a light switch in a room you've walked through 1,000 times. That's when I saw it. Folded neatly on the top shelf, tucked between an old heating pad and a stack of beach towels we hadn't used since last summer. There it was. A man's shirt. Not just any shirt. It was crisp, expensive, looked freshly dry-cleaned. White with faint blue pinstripes. Definitely not mine. I remember staring at it for a few seconds longer than I probably should have, just trying to convince myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Something boring. Something that wouldn't tighten my stomach the way it already had. I picked it up, turned it in my hands. The fabric was soft. Too soft for something off the rack. My shirts were more functional. This one was intentional. Designer. And that's when I caught the scent. Subtle, but their cologne. Not mine. Not the one Jenna used to buy me either. This was sharper, fresher, like cedarwood and citrus. Masculine in that clean, unbothered way. Still holding it, I walked into the living room where Jenna was curled up on the couch, half watching some reality show with her phone in her lap. She looked up, saw the shirt, and didn't miss a beat. "Oh," she said, barely blinking. "That's probably Ryan's brother's. He was here last weekend. Remember? He must have left it behind." Her voice was casual, unbothered. She even smiled like she was amused by the find. I didn't say anything right away, just looked at her. I tried to recall her mentioning Ryan's brother, tried to pull up some mental image of him walking through our door or crashing on our couch. Nothing. No memory. And we'd known Ryan for years. If his brother had visited, I probably would have known. "You never said he came by," I said finally, not accusing, just trying to find my footing. She shrugged, turning her eyes back to the screen. It was super quick. He was just dropping something off. I didn't think it was worth mentioning. Something about the way she said it made me feel stupid for asking. Like I was overreacting. Like I'd walked into the room with a tinfoil hat on my head. "Okay," I said, still holding the shirt. I hesitated a beat longer, then folded it over my arm and went back to the hallway to return it where I'd found it. I tucked it back into the same corner of the shelf, but this time I placed it differently, angled so I'd know if it moved. That evening, she made dinner, pasta, garlic bread, salad. Everything was normal on the surface. She laughed at my jokes. She asked about my coworker's baby. She poured us wine and kissed my cheek when I got up to do the dishes. But there was something off. It wasn't in what she said. It was in what she didn't. The small pauses. The way her phone was face down on the table. The way she kept looking toward the hallway, like she expected something or someone to come through. After dinner, she stood by the sink, drying her hands on a dish towel, and then she just blurted it out. "I think I need some space." I turned, my hand still resting on the edge of the counter. "What do you mean?" "Just one night," she said quickly, almost like she'd rehearsed it. "To think. To clear my head. I'm not saying anything drastic. I just need to breathe, Michael. Michael. Not babe. Not hey. Not even you. Just my name, spoken like a stranger might use it. Formal. Measured. You want to go somewhere tonight?" I asked. "Like your sisters?" "No," she said, already wiping down the counter like she was finishing a shift. "I think I'll just get a hotel for the night. Please don't take it the wrong way. It's not about you. I need to think." I didn't have the words. I stood there, feeling the echo of what she wasn't saying. "Okay," I said, because what else do you say when someone you love is halfway out the door and smiling like it's a formality? She packed light, a tote bag with a change of clothes, her phone charger, lip balm, the kind of casual exit that made it clear she'd already decided before she told me. I walked her to the door. She gave me a soft look, like I was something fragile she didn't want to break. "I'll call you in the morning," she said. "Yeah." I nodded, trying to believe her, and then she was gone. I stood by the door for a few minutes, listening to the silence she left behind. Then I walked into the kitchen and poured myself another glass of wine. The house felt larger. Too large. Like everything was echoing. I wandered back into the hallway. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to touch something to hold a piece of her in the absence she'd left. I opened the cabinet again and pulled down the shirt. Same scent. Same softness. Same not mine weight. I held it in both hands and pressed it to my face. That cologne wasn't from a brother. Not from Ryan. Not from any quick visit that didn't leave a mark. It smelled like an alibi. And I knew then whatever had just happened between us this one night wasn't about clearing her head. It was about creating distance. Room for something to shift. I stood in the kitchen, the lights dimmed, the shirt pressed against my chest like it might whisper a confession. And in that moment I understood something I didn't want to admit. The foundation had already cracked. That shirt was the first trace left behind. The first thing that didn't belong. But it wouldn't be the last. They say when something's wrong, you just know. I used to think that was dramatic, that people who said stuff like that were reading too much into ordinary problems. But after that night, the night she walked out with nothing but a tote bag and a soft excuse, I started to feel it. In my chest. In my stomach. In the air of our home. Something was wrong. And not in the fixable way. At first, I told myself not to spiral. I went about my routines. I folded the laundry. I refilled the bird feeder out back like I always did on Saturdays. I even made the bed on her side like some pathetic ritual of hope. But with each passing day, new things chipped away at the lie I was trying to live in. She came home the next morning like she said she would. She looked refreshed. Not puffy-eyed or wrung out from a night of soul-searching like I imagined. Just calm. Controlled. She kissed my cheek and poured herself coffee like nothing had happened. When I asked how she slept, she just smiled and said it was good to have some space. That's when I started paying attention. The little things added up first. Her phone, once left charging in the open, was now constantly in her back pocket or face down on the counter. She set a new lock screen, one I didn't know. She was always texting, but when I walked into the room, the screen would go black so fast it might as well have been a reflex. She started working late. Not just once or twice, but consistently. Deadlines, she'd say. Backlogged projects. The team's a mess without me. The words were fine. The logic checked out. But the tone? Flat. Practiced. Like she'd used it before, just not on me. She stopped asking about my day. That was the one that hit the hardest. For years, no matter how tired we were or how routine life felt, she'd ask. Even if the answer was boring. She used to lean her head on my shoulder while I talked about inventory counts or random conversations with my boss. Now she just scrolled through her phone or disappeared upstairs to wind down. One night, I came home early and found her sitting on the edge of the bed, half-dressed, staring at her laptop like it had just insulted her. She didn't hear me come in. The screen was angled away from the door and she slammed it shut so fast it startled me. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "Yeah," she said, too fast. "Just work stress." I nodded. Didn't push. But I started watching. And what I saw was a slow erosion. A quiet, steady hollowing out of the woman I used to know. Her side of the bed stayed cold more often than not. She'd fall asleep facing the opposite direction or not at all, sometimes staying up so late that I'd wake at 2 a.m. and find her gone, only to hear the faint hum of her phone from the living room. When I reached for her, just a touch on the arm, a hand on her back, she tensed. Not a lot. Just enough. Enough that it stung. Enough that I started reaching less. One night, maybe 3 weeks after the shirt incident, we were watching a movie. Something light. She laughed at all the right moments, but her eyes didn't track the screen. Her phone buzzed twice. She glanced at it and smiled, not a big smile, just the kind you give when you read something familiar. An asterisk, mate. "Who is it?" I asked, pretending to sound casual. She didn't look at me. "Just Dana. Work stuff." I nodded. Took a sip of my beer. But I remembered something then. Dana didn't text. She was the type who left voicemails or wrote long emails. She'd said it a dozen times. It all built slowly, like a mosaic. Not one piece was enough on its own. But together? Together they painted something undeniable. One morning I reached for her laptop. Ours, really. We used it for bills, planning trips, all the boring parts of being adults. It was never password protected. But now it was. New password. And when I asked her about it, she looked me dead in the eyes and said, "I changed it after that malware warning last week." There was no malware warning. But I nodded anyway. Because if I said what I was really thinking, if I laid it all out, every instinct and suspicion, I knew she'd turn it back on me. She'd call me paranoid. Controlling. I'd be the insecure one. So instead, I kept my distance. I started noticing the way she dressed before work, newer outfits, more makeup, earrings I hadn't seen in months. She wore perfume again, the kind she used to save for date nights. But now it wasn't for me. I checked our calendar one night, something we both synced to for years, and noticed 2 appointments I didn't recognize. Both marked meeting, off-site. One during lunch, the other late in the day. I asked about them casually over dinner. "Oh," she said, pausing between bites, "just vendor stuff. Nothing exciting." And yet, she hadn't mentioned them. She always told me about vendor meetings. Hell, she used to vent about how boring they were. The worst of it was how ordinary she made everything seem. That was her gift, I guess. She made the unraveling feel like routine. One night, I stood outside our bathroom door while she showered. Her phone was on the counter. For a brief second, I thought about checking it. Just picking it up and seeing the lock screen. But I didn't. Because if I did, and if I found something, what then? Would I confront her? Would she admit anything? Would it even matter? Instead, I stood there, staring at my own reflection in the hallway mirror. I looked tired. Older. Worn down by suspicion. That's when it hit me, I wasn't looking for proof anymore. I didn't need it. Because the truth had already settled in, quietly and completely. I was no longer someone she came home to. I was someone she lived beside. We shared a bed but not a life. I had become invisible. A bypassed detail in her day. It was a Thursday, gray skies, steady rain, and one of those days where everything feels like a low hum in your chest. Work had let out early. Some system went down and they told us to pack up and head home while IT sorted it out. I remember sitting in my car in the parking lot for a few minutes, watching the wipers drag across the windshield, not really knowing what I was about to walk into. If I'm honest, I almost didn't go home. I thought about grabbing a drink somewhere, maybe running an errand just to delay the silence waiting behind our front door. But something pulled me there. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was some part of me finally tired of pretending. The house was too quiet when I walked in. Not unusual, but still different. I hung up my coat, kicked off my shoes, and headed toward the bedroom, figuring she might still be getting ready for work, or whatever she called it now. That's when I opened the door. And everything changed. Jenna was standing by the bed, rearranging the pillows with a frantic sort of precision. Like she'd just heard the front door and was trying to make the room look untouched. She spun around so fast when she saw me that her ponytail whipped across her shoulder. "Hey," she said, her voice light. "Too light. You're home early." I just stared. My eyes didn't move from her, but I was taking everything in. The slight flush in her cheeks. The subtle sheen on her skin. And then, there it was. The scent. That same cologne. The one from the shirt in the cabinet. It was stronger now. Lingering in the air. Mixed with something that didn't belong to me. I walked a few steps into the room and noticed a small slip of paper on her nightstand. It wasn't hidden, just sitting there like it belonged. I picked it up. It was a theater ticket. 2 seats. Tonight. Downtown. Not a group thing. Not some work event. This was a planned-out night for 2. "You like plays now?" I asked, holding it up. She blinked. "What?" "Oh, that's old." I meant to toss it. I didn't say anything. I set the ticket back down slowly. My hands were steady. My mind wasn't. Then I saw them. On her wrist, light, but there. Small red marks. Faint, like fingers had been wrapped around her too tightly for too long. She noticed me looking. She pulled her sleeve down. "I burned myself on the curling iron," she said almost automatically. But her hair was straight. It wasn't even curled. I think that was the moment something inside me went still. Not angry. Not desperate. Just still. Like my brain finally clicked into a gear it had been avoiding for weeks. I walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. Rain ran down the glass in tiny rivers. Outside, the driveway was empty except for my car. No one else's. Not now. Not anymore. But they'd been here. I could feel it in the air. The room was warm, lived in, messed with. I turned back to her, but I didn't ask anything else. Because what was the point? She opened her mouth like she wanted to explain something, then closed it again. The silence between us swelled until it was bigger than the room itself. "I didn't know you'd be home this early," she finally said, softer now. I nodded once. I figured. She took a step forward. "I know what this looks like." I held up a hand. "Don't." "Michael," she started, her voice cracking just a little. I said don't. This time it came out sharper than I meant, and she flinched. I took a breath. "I don't want another version of the truth, Jenna. I don't need you to paint it pretty." Her lip trembled like she wanted to cry. Maybe she would have if it felt useful. But I think she knew it wouldn't change anything anymore. She had used up that currency. All of it. I walked past her, through the doorway and into the kitchen where the lights were still off. The silence in the house felt thicker now, like every sound from outside, cars, rain, distant thunder, was pushing in through the walls to fill the void she'd left behind. I leaned against the counter, feeling the cool surface beneath my palms. In the past, I would have asked questions. Who is he? How long has this been going on? Where did we start to fall apart? But I didn't need to ask anymore. I had enough. The signs had always been there. A breadcrumb trail of neglect and distance and lies she wrapped in soft, logical language. But this was different. This was a moment that snapped it all into place. I heard her walk into the hallway. I didn't turn around. You don't understand, she said from behind me. I understand perfectly, I replied. She didn't answer. I heard her shift her weight from one foot to the other like she didn't know whether to stay or leave. I didn't plan for any of this, she said after a long pause. I looked out the window, watching the storm roll in from across the street. Yeah, I bet. The truth is, betrayal doesn't feel like fire. It's not hot. It's not explosive. It's cold. It settles like frost in your bones. A slow, creeping realization that the person you love just stepped away from you one day and didn't bother to turn back. That night, she didn't leave. Not officially. She said she needed to shower, change, get some rest. She moved through the house like a ghost of herself, her movements small and uncertain. And I let her. Because I was already gone in my head. I didn't know exactly what would come next, but I knew it wouldn't include more of this. More pretending. More waiting for her to come home in a version of herself I no longer recognized. Later, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I thought about that shirt in the cabinet. How it started everything. How it wasn't just a shirt, it was a flare in the dark. A sign. The marks on her wrist. The cologne in the bedroom. The ticket. Her silence. All of it confirmation. I didn't need her to say it. I had seen enough. And nothing she could say now would undo what I already knew. There's a strange kind of clarity that comes when you stop fighting for someone who already let go. It doesn't show up all at once. It creeps in quiet, gradual, until one day you realize your heart isn't in your throat anymore. It's just still. The morning after I found the ticket, the marks, and the scent that wasn't mine, I woke up before her. I lay there in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain tapping lightly against the windows. She was still asleep, curled toward the far edge of the mattress, like I was something to be avoided in her dreams. I didn't try to move closer. I didn't reach for her. I just lay there, hands resting on my chest, letting the weight of everything settle where it wanted. That was the first day I didn't make coffee for both of us. I brewed one cup, just mine, and left hers out of habit, then dumped it down the sink an hour later when it stayed untouched. I didn't mention breakfast. I didn't ask if she had plans. I didn't ask anything. The truth was, I didn't want answers anymore. Answers required hope. And I was fresh out. That week, I started untangling myself from the version of our life I had been clinging to. I cleared the shared bookshelf in the living room, taking my paperbacks and photography books and stacking them neatly in a box. I left her things untouched. That was important, somehow. Like setting a boundary in a war that didn't need more casualties. She noticed, of course. Asked me what I was doing. I need space, I said, echoing the exact words she used weeks earlier. She didn't argue. She just nodded like she knew better than to push. Maybe she thought it was temporary. Maybe she still believed I'd cool down, come back, fold like I always did. But I didn't. I started running again. Every evening, rain or not, I laced up my old sneakers and hit the pavement. At first it was about escaping the house, the noise of my thoughts, the ghost of the life we had. But soon it became something else, my own space. My own rhythm. The only part of the day that made sense. I took photos again too. Old cameras, dusty lenses I hadn't touched in over a year. I wandered the city with them, capturing alleys, storefronts, puddles, faces I didn't know. I was remembering things about myself that had been dormant, shelved like artifacts of a life I forgot to keep living. I didn't tell her any of this. I didn't need to. She didn't ask. She was home less anyway. Always some meeting, some coworker's birthday, some last-minute project that needed her after hours. I stopped waiting up. I stopped checking the time. I'd hear her key in the lock around midnight, sometimes later, and I wouldn't move. She'd come in quietly, like a tenant trying not to wake a landlord. One night she stood in the doorway of our bedroom, expecting what? A question? A confrontation? I rolled over and turned off the lamp. That was the night I stopped leaving the hallway light on for her. She noticed that too. Small things started shifting in her. She'd ask how my day was, but I'd answer without looking up. She wore new clothes to bed, old t-shirts, not the silk things she'd started wearing in her space phase. She made coffee one morning and left 2 cups on the counter. I drank mine. Left hers. The silence between us wasn't cold anymore. It wasn't cruel. It was indifferent. I think that's when it started to scare her. She wasn't used to my stillness. For years, I'd been the one trying. The one smoothing things over. The one who filled awkward silences with jokes or small talk or offers to order takeout. But I'd run out of things to say. And when you stop chasing someone, they have to face their own footsteps. She asked me one night if I was seeing someone. I almost laughed. Not because the idea was funny, but because it was so far from the truth. I was barely seeing myself, let alone anyone else. But her asking that told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't feeling guilty. She was feeling watched. Slipping. I just shook my head. No, I said. I'm just not pretending anymore. She didn't respond. Just stood there like someone who's realized the fire went out long before they ever noticed the smoke. There were nights I wondered if I was being too passive, too quiet. Should I confront her again? Should I demand the truth, closure, something final? But every time I got close to that thought, it felt exhausting. What good would it do? The damage wasn't in the details. It was in the absence. The neglect. The way she looked through me instead of at me. One Saturday, I packed a duffel bag with some of my things, clothes, a couple books, toiletries, and took it out to the car. I didn't leave. Not yet. But I wanted to see how it felt, knowing I could. That if I had to, I was ready. She saw it later, asked, "Are you going somewhere?" "Not today," I said. But she heard the unspoken part, "Maybe tomorrow." By then, I had stopped looking at our shared photos on the walls. I stopped noticing the things we picked out together, the lamp in the corner, the rug in the hall, the chipped mugs we bought at that roadside market 3 years ago. They didn't mean what they used to. They were just objects now. Background noise in a story that no longer felt like mine. The turning point, the actual one, the quiet moment where I knew I wasn't coming back emotionally, was a Tuesday morning. Nothing special. I was brushing my teeth when she walked past the bathroom, hair still wet from a shower. She looked at me like she might say something, then didn't. We stood like that for a moment. Two people who used to know each other. Who used to love each other. And the weight of that should have hurt. But it didn't. It felt like standing next to someone else's ex. From that day forward, I stopped checking in. I didn't ask if she was working late, or if she needed dinner, or if she was okay. I didn't ask about her boss, her friends, her mood. I didn't ask anything. And in return, she stopped trying to perform normal. I think part of her thought she could recalibrate. That if she pulled back just enough, I'd rush forward again. But the thing about bridges is once they collapse, you don't keep walking. You learn how to swim, or you find another path. I'd stopped hoping for repair. And that's when I realized hope had been the heaviest thing I carried. Now that it was gone, I could breathe again. It didn't happen all at once, but eventually Jenna noticed. She didn't say anything at first, didn't have to. I could see it in the way her eyes followed me when I moved through the house. Like she was searching for something familiar in me that wasn't there anymore. Like she couldn't figure out when the roles had reversed. For years, I was the one checking in, reaching out, trying to hold the seams together with words, attention, affection. Now, it was her drifting into rooms just to see where I was. Watching me instead of ignoring me. Asking questions she never used to ask, like, "You heading out?" or "Want to eat something?" But I'd already adjusted to the silence she left behind. And I liked the quiet better. I'd grown used to the sound of my own thoughts again. To walks without her voice in my ear. To evenings that didn't end with waiting for a car to pull into the driveway. When she spoke now, it startled me. Not because I didn't expect it, but because I no longer needed it. She asked me one night if I wanted to watch something together. We used to binge shows. Sunday marathons, inside jokes, shared guesses about who the villain was. Yeah? The idea of sitting beside her on the couch made my skin itch in a way I didn't understand. So I told her I had work to do. I didn't. I just didn't want to pretend anymore. She stood in the doorway for a few seconds too long before walking away. That's when I knew the shift had reached her. She started dressing differently around the house, nicer, intentional. Lip gloss in the morning. Perfume I hadn't smelled in months. At first, I thought maybe she had somewhere to be. But she didn't go anywhere. She stayed in. Just floated from room to room, waiting for me to notice. I didn't. She started making small talk during dinner. Commented on the weather, her coworkers even brought up a show we used to love like we were still those people. I nodded when it was polite to do so. I answered when she asked direct questions. But I didn't initiate. Not once. And it drove her crazy. Not in an explosive way. Not the kind you can spot across the room. This was quieter. Sharper. She started hovering in my space without saying anything. Would stand next to me at the sink or lean against the hallway door just to see if I'd react. I didn't. And that unsettled her more than anger ever could. One night she tried to bring up the past. Said something like, "Remember when we used to eat those horrible frozen pizzas in bed and pretend we were food critics?" I said, "Yeah, and that was it." I didn't smile. I didn't feed the memory. I just acknowledged it like it belonged to someone else. Because it did. She stared at me for a moment, mouth half open like she was about to say something more. Then she turned away and left the room. It kept happening, these little attempts at reconnecting. But they always felt rehearsed, like she was trying to remember how to be someone I might still want. She brought home my favorite snacks. Left post-it notes with "Have a good day" near the coffee maker. Bought new sheets. I changed nothing. The notes went unread. The snacks sat unopened. The sheets stayed in their packaging. Because she wasn't trying to fix anything. She was trying to control the narrative again. And I wasn't letting her. She didn't know what to do with the version of me who didn't orbit her. She was used to being the sun in the room, the one everything else revolved around. And I used to participate in that willingly. I fed into it. I softened every sharp edge. Smoothed every awkward pause. Apologized first, even when I wasn't wrong. Now I didn't do any of that. I let tension sit in the air like fog. I let moments pass without resolving them. I let her feel what distance really was. There was a particular morning I won't forget. I was getting ready to go for a run, lacing my shoes near the door, and she appeared with coffee, 2 cups. One in her hand, one extended to me. "You didn't make any," she said. "I'm good," I replied, standing without taking it. She didn't move her hand. Just stared at me like she was trying to decode something that used to be simple. I grabbed my headphones and left. I don't know what she did with the coffee. I didn't ask. That same evening, she asked if I wanted to have dinner with her parents that weekend. "They've been asking about you," she said. I looked up from my laptop. "Tell them I said hi." "You're not coming?" "No." She blinked. "Can I ask why?" "I don't want to pretend," I said. "Not with them. Not with anyone." Her face didn't fall right away. She held it together. Tried to maintain that composure she always had. But I saw it in her shoulders, how they dipped slightly like someone had just handed her something heavy. She left the room without another word. Later that night, I sat on the porch alone. It had rained earlier, and the smell of wet pavement and spring clung to the air. I watched headlights crawl by on the street and thought about how many nights I used to spend worrying about where she was, who she was with, what I wasn't enough of. I didn't feel that anymore. I just felt free. Not happy. Not yet. But unburdened. Jenna didn't know how to cope with the absence of conflict. She was expecting a fight, a confrontation, some final messy showdown she could spin into a story where we were both at fault. But I didn't give her that. I gave her quiet. And in that quiet, she started unraveling. She stayed in more. Cancelled plans. I heard her on the phone less and less. Her laughter, which used to echo from room to room, went silent. She walked slower, like she was stuck in thought all the time. One night I found her crying in the bathroom with the door cracked. She didn't know I saw. And I didn't go to her. Because I couldn't be the person to comfort her anymore. She used to accuse me of being too soft. Too accommodating. "You always try to fix everything," she once said, like it was an insult. But now? Now that softness was gone, and she didn't know what to do with what was left. There was one last attempt. She came into my office while I was editing photos. Said she wanted to talk. I didn't turn from the screen. "I'm listening." She sat on the edge of the desk, wringing her hands. "I feel like I'm losing you." I looked at her finally. "You're not losing me, Jenna. You already lost me." Her lip quivered. "Can we fix it?" "No," I said. "We passed that point a long time ago. You just didn't notice." She left without another word. After that, she didn't try anymore. No more notes. No more small talk. No more questions about dinner or shared calendars or if I was coming home. And I think, in some way, that was her surrender. She didn't understand how stillness could be so loud. How the absence of anger could speak louder than screaming. But she felt it. Because the quiet didn't mean I didn't care. It meant I had stopped caring enough to keep trying. It happened early, too early for the sun to be up, too early for second thoughts. I stood at the edge of her bedroom, bag already packed. Just the essentials, clothes, documents, my camera, a few old photographs I couldn't bear to leave behind. No fanfare. No last glance. I moved through the house quietly like a guest in someone else's space. The hardwood creaked in familiar spots. The coffee brewed slow, like always. Everything looked the same, but none of it felt like mine anymore. I poured a cup and stood by the kitchen window, letting the steam rise to my face. Outside, the sky was a dull gray, like the day couldn't quite commit to being anything at all. It fit. I left her a note. Just one line, tucked beneath the mug she always used. "You stopped choosing me. I'm just following your lead. No accusations. No anger. Just the truth she never said but lived out day by day. And then I left. Quietly. Without a slammed door. Without the kind of goodbye that begs for someone to chase you. Because this time I didn't want to be chased. She didn't text right away. Not the first day. Not the second. I think part of her expected me to come back. To cool off. To soften like I always did. But I didn't. Instead, I moved into a small apartment near the water. One bedroom, clean walls, silence that didn't echo with guilt. I built a life again, simple, quiet, mine. I filled my days with work, runs, photography. Rediscovered friends I'd let slip through the cracks. I slept through the night for the first time in months. Eventually, the messages started. A text. Then a call. Then another. I didn't answer. I didn't need to hear her regret. I'd lived inside the hollow of that silence for too long to pretend it had anything left to offer. Months later, I saw her. A coffee shop. Total accident. She froze when she saw me. I didn't stop. Just nodded once, calm, detached, and kept walking. Her silence, the one she used like a we *p*n, had come full circle. Now it echoed back at her. Loud, lonely, and permanent.